Hello, welcome to Harbinger's The Play That Changed My Life. I'm Patrick White, and I'm co-founder of Harbinger Theatre, and we created this podcast just to talk about theater. And I have two great friends in the room this morning. Kyle West, who is the executive director of Fort Salem Theater. Hello, Kyle.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sandra Boynton, who is the artistic director of Will Kempe's Players and a guest director at Siena College doing An Enemy
of the People.
This fall. Hello, Sandy.
Good morning, Patrick. It's so good to see you.
Oh, it's great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I just created this podcast as an excuse to talk about theater. So here we are. What's going on? There was an article a couple of weeks ago in the New York Times by Michael Paulson, and it was about theater in the time of COVID and how audiences are, whether audiences are coming back and what's happening to theater across the country, and it's referenced in many curtain speeches. So I want to talk about theater in the time of COVID. Thrilling, horrifying, exasperating. What's going on the front lines?
I think D, all of the above, is the correct answer. I think it's been kind of a wild ride. We all were so desperate to re-enter 2 years ago now. I've kind of lost track. And I think at the time, willing and able to do whatever we could. And while we've grown a lot, I think now there's still the back of our minds knowing that every day could be the last rehearsal before we're on a break or the last performance until we catch up. So I think we're still kind of in the ebb and flow of things. So yeah, it's terrifying, but I think we're equally grateful to be back on a different note.
Yeah, I feel that as well. I feel thrilled and tenuous and Sandy?
Yeah. Again, Will Kemp's. All right. This is the Will Kemp's Players hat first.
Yes.
Will Kemp's Players is a unique organization because we have no real estate.
Right.
We tour entirely. Our real estate is a very nice green bus. So we tour. So we were able, out of COVID, to start playing really a season ahead of everybody else because we played in parks and outside. We were able to stage. We missed one summer, and then we're right back in. So this is our third summer back, which was unique because, again, we were ready to stage outside. And we were fine with the social distance. We cut back on our audience contact a little bit.
Right.
But we were able to get back quickly. So we were one of the first organizations that could full throttle it. At the same time, we're finding that audiences are, how do I put this? Less willing to be out there. There was the full flush of, we can go someplace.
Right.
And now there's more caution. Now there's more angst. Now the mainstay of the theater, which had been the older folks, are less there, less participatory. And yet, by the end of our season this year, we had great big full houses at Music Haven.
That was a huge crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And you think that's mostly health conscious and...
I simply don't know.
Yeah.
I'm at the point where I do know what the past looked like, and I look out into the future and I see a black wall because I just don't know whom I'm entertaining and what the form of that looks like now. And I've been around a while, so this is very weird to just not know.
In a way, it's exciting, though, isn't it, to face every day? It's exciting, and, if your budget relies on it, but it's exciting in a way that makes you question, with every production, what are you doing with this? Who are you going to attract, and why are you doing this? Right?
Yeah, and I think something that we've noticed at Fort Salem is when we first reopened, And of course, we were at a limited capacity at that time, but we had a really great wave of people just trying to, A, wanting to get out and go somewhere, but B, also wanting to support the arts, understanding that there had been such a challenge for so long. So we had that wave of support that really came in strong at the start. And there's still a big supportive audience, but I do agree. I think some of our older patrons, especially, have been a little more reluctant. And I think we're still kind of figuring that out. What is the future audience? And I mean, that's always been the problem, too, is developing a newer, younger audience. But that wave of we just wanted to get out of the house, we just wanted to be supportive. Now we've been supportive, and now we also don't want to get sick again. So it's this cycle that we're kind of trapped in.
Yeah. I know we were on that wave. We saw your inaugural production, right? Marvelous
We did.
Wonderettes. Yep. Yeah. We were very excited to see you guys in the theater, and we still are producing at the rate that you're doing such great material. You're upping the game with every production, scenically, technically, costume-wise, the crowds. Your cast for Rocky Horror is filled with Capital Region veterans. Talk about your cast for Rocky Horror.
Yeah, so this is a really exciting one for us because I think 70% of our cast is brand new to Fort Salem Theater. A lot of them have been to see a show or have had a friend in a show, but they just came out of the woodwork for this. And it's a uniquely small cast. It's written for only the principals and 4 ensemble members, and that's what we stuck to. But it is a really small and mighty group from, I think among the group, they've kind of worked everywhere. This show, each of our productions, we tend to have a guest artist from out of town. Sometimes it's necessity. We're in a rural community and need to find somebody to fill a hole. And sometimes it's just a contact of ours that we're excited to bring it in and work with. So on this production, we have one person who is not local, but the average commute to our theater by our cast is over an hour, which is very flattering to us, but wild.
That's great. We need to get like Sunoco to sponsor you, or
that sounds great to me.
yeah. Put a pump out back. That's fantastic, but it speaks a lot to what you're producing as well. And we were talking about what is Capital Region, and I feel like if you're producing something that people want to see, people want to perform in, welcome to the Capital Region. An hour away for doing something that you're passionate about. Is worthwhile, So congratulations, and
thank you.
Speaks well to what these performers are going to put on stage, what they're sacrificing, what they're, what it is to get to rehearsal.
Yeah, it's a big time commitment for anyone. So to add that commute is, a lot more work.
Awesome. So I transitioned into current projects rather quickly. I'm still new at this. But Sandy, what are you doing at Siena? The Enemy of the People, who's the translator?
Are you ready?
Yeah.
It's Karl Marx's daughter, Eleanor.
Oh.
So it was, right now, Enemy of the People is opening in London, and it will be opening on Broadway later this winter.
Yeah.
So Siena wanted a translation that nobody could put a hand on. So we have the Marx translation, and it's kind of wild. Sorry, I'm going to be academic for a minute. It is just so wild. Do you know that she translated a lot of Ibsen into English? And there is a record of her and her paramour being in a production of A Doll's House with, as an actor, George Bernard Shaw. Yeah, it's that wild.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty decent translation that I took Patrick, you'll be surprised, a pretty liberal red pen to.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. I mean, remember, she's a German speaker translating the Norwegian into English. So there are a lot of prepositional phrases.
Yeah.
But that's the translation we're using, and it's fun and it's good. And the interesting thing about this play is that it's a good play. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, are the people complicated.
Yeah.
Any issue you want to talk about is in there someplace.
Yeah. So I'm assuming the audience knows the Rocky Horror Show, but just a brief overview of what these projects are. Rocky Horror Show is...
I think the biggest, the most excited moment about the Rocky Horror Show is that it's more an experience than a show. There's a plot, you can follow it, it's lovely, but come for the experience. Yes. If you've never been to the Rocky Horror Show, there are people that follow the movie and also follow live productions and talk back to the actors, which we've been trying to rehearse with, and that's a challenge. But, the audience yells back. There is historically a series of props that are also used by the audience that we're selling for $5. It's, not a moneymaker, just part of the fun, where people snap their gloves with different moments in the show and have noise blowers and throw confetti, which we're doing bubbles because cleaning confetti in theater seats is a nightmare. But we're trying to bring the audience up on the stage in the finale to sing and dance with us, which some people will love and some people will hate. But it's really just like a big, almost Halloween party. And we feel like we're throwing a party this time rather than just doing a show. The choreography is kick-ass. The cast sounds like, American Idol stars. They're all singing their faces off. But it's just a big party, and we're kind of enjoying just being on the fun side. There's value in fun and inspirational theater, but we're just leaning into the fun on this, and it's nice.
This is a British musical, Richard O'Brien, correct?
It is.
And it was a musical before it was a movie, and then the movie, I saw it at St. Mark's Playhouse back in the 80s, middle of its 20-year run or whatever, of midnight shows, when the toast and the confetti and all that stuff came in. So the props really started with the movie, and,
Yeah, and they've just worked their way into the show. And there's still, I know the Kids of Albany is a big production here, and they annually do the movie version. And it's a hit. It's also really cool anytime non-theater people fall in love with theater. And I'm hoping that this is one of those opportunities where the door opens to somebody who would never come and see, something they've never heard of, but they get there and they're like, oh, this was a fun space. Let me come back. Sometimes it's challenging to present just commercial theater and not feel a little guilt for not offering something a little meatier.
Interesting.
And that is always my goal with some of these shows, that just get people in the door and have them fall in love with being in a room full of people.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of Rocky Horror that way. That's great. And Sandy, Enemy of the People, Henrik Ibsen is the story of
a Norwegian researcher and doctor who sets up a project to create a spa, baths, in his own hometown. He thinks he's got good water. He thinks it's healthy. But in the process of having it all set up, he sends away the water to be tested at a university and finds out that it is infested with the bacteria and, as he puts it, infusoria. Lovely word. Unfortunately, the town's people and his brother, who's the mayor, are so invested in the money that the spa will make that they push back against his scheme to repipe and resewer the baths so they're healthy again. And it is this political story of what happens to the doctor and his family and friends and the townspeople as they confront this very modern issue of water pollution and ground pollution and economics and politics. It's prescient. It's prescient. And it picks up the story from the point of view of, I'm going to call it an elite an intellectual elite trying to move more ordinary people into doing things that will be good for them. And that's a really difficult part of the story, which I have not touched. No, I want that difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think Ibsen was getting at when he wrote this?
I wish I don't like to second guess geniuses. I really don't. And I work with genius level material a lot of my life. I think he's both telling us that there are problems in them, their hills, that we need to address. But I think he's really also just putting against the wall all of the things, all of the problems that we have in becoming a group who addresses existential reality, existential problems for the human race and for Western society. And I don't think he gives us an answer, because I don't think in the play there's an answer, because all we're left, no, I'm not going to tell you that. What am I doing?
No spoilers on this podcast.
No, especially direct, you think? But I think he asks the audience to find an answer. I don't believe he's preaching.
Right.
This was the part of Ibsen's career where he was exploding social problems onto the stage.
Right.
Literally exploding them in Doll's House and in Ghosts, and not giving you an answer, and getting really censored and tossed off the stage and out of countries because of it.
It's funny you mentioned preaching. Let me get back to that. But both these projects feel provocative in a way that they're asking their audiences to do something.
Absolutely.
Right?
In very different ways, too.
Yeah.
And in very similar ways, because there's a town meeting in the fourth act. And perhaps the town will be the audience.
Oh, I like that. Oh, that's great.
Interesting.
That's fantastic. You had mentioned preaching, and one of the responses, Michael Paulson's article about COVID, look, we're coming back, is that there were all these comments online, thousands, about people, why they're not coming back to the theater or what could be preventing audiences from coming back. And one of them was the preachy. They felt like seasons or companies were picking productions that were preachy. And you mentioned that Ibsen is not preachy. But what do you think of that response? What are they talking about? And do you see it? Is it something that you feel you have to look out for? Is it something you like, don't like?
Oh, boy. All right. So if I've started the preaching, I might as well get back up on the podium. Boy, I'm going to make this even more abstract, I think. I think what's happened in the process very often is that we have chosen to do very focused material that focuses on a new story or a new shading of an older story or a new look at an older idea that tends to be kind of very tightly focused. I think the place for nuance in performing arts is in all of the live arts, as opposed to the single focus of a camera, like now. And I think when you have that wider field of vision, so the audience has this wider field of vision, they're seeing more nuance. It isn't just a headshot of the protagonist saying something, but that wider shot where there are reactions going on in silence or not so much silence to what's going on. If this film-educated and television-receptive audience is going to focus down to a singular story told from a singular point of view and then rehearsed and produced from a very tightly focused point of view, you get preaching. You get the form of preaching, whether or not the intention was preaching.
Fascinating.
And I think here the form and the content are really at each other's throats. Because I don't think people are intentionally preaching, but the form sets them up to be preaching.
Awesome. What I hear in this is that when the audience is excluded from being participants, that
Participants, or to have a wide view on the stage,
Okay.
to have a wide view. I was working on that last night, where we have, I'm doing a little experiment with the Siena kids. Everybody who's in my town scene, principals and ensemble alike, are rewriting the fourth act and putting in their own lines that are there, that are designated by either Mrs. Marks, Madam Marks, or me, and then adding their responses. So they're rewriting their own scripts. And next Wednesday, I put it all back together and see what I have. But then I will have stories of 15 people who are principal players.
yeah. And that's a response that I've heard in the past when I've asked this question, is that preachiness comes from a single voice, or it comes from an agenda, and that when there are well-made characters expressing a variety of different viewpoints.
Then it becomes a living, responsive thing. It becomes theater as opposed to film, which I think focuses too tightly.
Yeah, great.
That's interesting. Just an interesting concept that it's perhaps preachier or too preachy to welcome people back. Because theater is designed to be a mirror of society. You know, I think we get something out of the live experience because we can relate to the humans there. And I don't know that that's any different than it's ever been. I just wonder if people are more resistant to the politics of perhaps some newer topics. So I'd be interested to deeper understand what people mean by that.
Sure. That's my reaction to it, is what in particular are you talking about? You know, what are the specific titles that you feel?
Right.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Are we uncomfortable talking more deeply about race or sexuality or, hot topics that we've had to shy away from previously?
When I read it, I kind of felt that they were talking about a shift, a trend out of COVID, which actually I think it happened much before COVID, but the multicultural, diverse seasons where, we're giving a lot of voice to a lot of different communities that have been unheard of from up till now, that I thought that people were saying that the groups were being preachy in their scheduling by doing these multicultural works. That was kind of the way that I interpreted that.
And I think that maybe highlights our need to further develop audiences and find new audience members, not to alienate those of the past. I think we certainly want to present theater for everyone. There is theater for everyone. But if the majority voice is less comfortable hearing stories that are important today, I think that just, encourages us to keep finding our audience,
Right.
Which is challenging, but necessary.
Right. Yeah. And, as I said, I think that these are the topics, and these are the what's going on right now in American theater, how American theater is vital. I saw Jaja's African Braiding yesterday, which takes place in a African braiding salon in Harlem, with 7 women and an 8th character, a guy that comes in and out. But people say they don't write comedies anymore, and this was a mainstream workplace comedy. the bickering, the, different personality types. I mean, it was African women who didn't all have their green cards, so there were political issues within them being, an immigrant community, which was brought up in the play and dealt with, and some people thought that the ending of the play came out of nowhere because there are issues that come to a head with it. But I thought this is, if Neil Simon were a black African woman, this might be the play that he would write. Like this is the mainstream comedy today.
I hope they use that as a quote in their marketing now. I'm sending it to them.
I'm not sure who we're selling with that quote, but no, it was a fabulous time, and it was laugh out loud, beginning to end.
How was the audience?
Oh, great! I mean, and a wonderful mix, of Manhattan Theater Club subscribers, and a black audience that was there and having a great time, and it was raucous and fun, and yeah, we had a blast,
Awesome.
just, yeah, recommend it highly. What do you think of us forerunners in the new COVID theater chapter in American theater? I think of theater like, when I was growing up, I looked back on the 50s and Arthur Miller and, the golden age, and you'd say, oh my gosh, to be at Streetcar when they had a 15-minute standing ovation. I'm like, how did they do that? That hurts. How do you clap that long? But I used to think like that, but I was in New York City during the 80s and during AIDS and the rise of gay theater and how that affected politically, rights for the LGBTQ community. Like, you can trace it back, from gay weddings and trans rights to the normal heart, and how, theater is an active, contributory, progressive force in American life. And I feel that with COVID. Like, we are, doing something, right? Does it feel that way to you?
Oh, you're all looking at me again. Okay. Here we go. As artistic director of Will Kemp's Players, we'll start with something very simple. Will Kempe was a real man, and he was a clown. He was a wordplay artist, a dancer, a musician, and an improviser in modern terms. But the most important thing for me is that he was a clown. And when you look at clown in a very early modern sense, a clown is a performer who stands aside, who stands outside of the normal social medium. And because the clown and the court jester come from the same root, the court jester for the court and the clown for the ordinary citizen, they are the opposing voice. They are always the voice of conscience or the voice of fun, poking fun at the masters of the community, and they have the license to do so. So when I look at the American theater, we are clowns. Hi, we are all clowns. Our job is to stand aside and to poke the bear, and to poke the bear, and to poke the bear. That doesn't mean we necessarily are going to rile the bear, but we're there to poke and there to give the audience that alternative vision. That's what's happening again. It happened in the 50s because Miller and Williams were revolutionary. It happened in the 60s. It happened in the 70s, and on and on and on. And as clowns, we also have provided a community for those people who are outside the mainstream. As a kid, a family friend, when I was a child, was in the New York Theater, and he was a gay man. He couldn't survive in upstate New York, but he was fine downstate. And I was in a family, because of Gerald, that embraced gay people. But the gay person, the sexually divergent, the neurally divergent person, has always had home in the theater in the United States. And we have provided, as a community, not only the poking the bear function, but the community function for the people who must poke the bear.
Interesting.
Well, and I think very similar to that theme is why I moved here. And I mean, I purchased a venue and planned opening a theater when theater didn't exist. It was the middle of the pandemic. Because I think what the pandemic taught me, what the loss of theater taught me, is how valuable the community of it is. And I think that had made me double down on my commitment to theater and the kind of space I wanted to provide. I think on one hand, it's so valuable to be able to give the audience an experience that they can connect to and create conversations that often don't happen until you're right there getting a story, but also that world, that home for those of us who have found home in theater, or even just for those that need to find, for a lot of people, they find theater for a moment. Hopefully they learn something and it's not part of their future path. But I do think that the community is so important to a lot of us just in our day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Question, and really, Kyle, I've been fascinated because I know you moved up here and moved into a rural community, and I've always thought of theater as an urban
Sure.
art form. It requires that community function of people who go to a lot of theater and see a lot of theater and talk about it, and it's part of their lifestyle. How is it moving a Vital Theater into a rural community and creating a theatrical community within that? And are you getting that feedback that I think is necessary? I'm just shut up, Sandy.
Well, which feedback are you?
All of the above.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Cape Cod, but I have lived in bigger cities across the country. I've done Boston, New York City, Phoenix, and Dallas. So I am really a city guy as an adult. I had never considered moving to a rural community. I won't give you my full life story, but I had always had interest in being involved, in being a business owner. My parents were small business owners. That was always kind of in my blood, but I've always been a theater person. And at some point I realized, actually a friend acknowledged at one point, you're doing so much work for these theaters you're working for. Why aren't you leading this? And I had never considered that. And probably deep down I knew, because I didn't want to fund that. I didn't want to, give up everything, all the things we sacrifice. But it really sparked my interest in, I don't want to say the control of it, but having the ability to build the community that I believed in the capacity I believed in. I then was looking in Dallas for 2 years for a venue so I could create my own space. Dallas was a very theater-dense city, which is amazing. But what I discovered was, at least in that community, there was so much theater that each group was really just a small section of this group plus this group, and there wasn't really a singular identity that felt right for me. So in the pandemic, we realized I was doing marketing for Broadway theaters and tours out of a Dallas marketing firm full time, and that of course dried up immediately. My husband was working for the airlines. We knew that was also a challenged industry, and we realized Dallas wasn't necessarily our forever home. I had wanted to open a space, so we started just looking across the country. And we discovered the theater in Salem. The short version is we discovered it Monday, flew out Wednesday, and made our offer on Friday.
Wow.
We had been searching for 2 years, and it was just the right place for us. And the few people we were able to connect with, because it was COVID and we didn't live here, just felt like people we believed in. It was a beautiful venue that had fortunately been renovated. And looking at the history of the theater, and it had changed, it shifted a lot. You know, you worked there. It went from a big summer stock program to more of a concert, smaller event production. And we looked at that and felt like there was an opportunity to kind of do a little bit of both, to have some smaller events that are community-based, but also some bigger productions that can give more people more opportunities. So there's probably a lot more to that, and I'm not sure I directly answered your question, but we've had a very supportive community. Luckily, it's a community who does not shy away from sharing their opinion, so we know before they leave the theater if it's something they connected to or not. However, I often tell people it's like a Hallmark movie, because people are kind and outgoing and supportive, and they are open to those things that maybe perhaps some other audiences find preachy. They're open to coming and watching and listening and trying something new, in a way that I haven't found in the other places I've worked.
Cool.
Yeah, great.
Cool.
How's it feel? 4 years.
Exciting and scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's still, it's still every day. Is this the right show, or is this the
right.
time where?
And you also have classes going on. You do Midsummer Night's Dream is coming up after Rocky, so you're doing a lot of different stuff, and yeah.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. Our performing arts studio just started classes again yesterday, so it's really nice seeing the little ones get in there, because also our community does not necessarily have access to classes and programs like that. So, 10 years down the line, we will have these young adults who have had some training that wasn't available to some of the younger adults we're working with now. So that's exciting.
Great. I loved what you said, Sandy, about the clown and poking the bear, because my sister, who worked for the AG's office as an accountant, no one in my family is, it's not that they're not creative, but no one is really in the arts, and they consume arts. They love, reading and going to movies, but she's attending more of my performances, and she'll say to me, Patrick, theater's not really a thing, and I'm like, okay, but it's kind of right. We stand outside the thing. Yeah. So I feel better now.
You should.
Thank you.
But it's people forget that. I think people forget that really we are the outsiders, and we do poke.
Yeah.
And it isn't necessarily mean or preachy. It's just poke. Did you realize that's what you were doing?
Yeah.
Just checking.
Great. So I titled this podcast, "The Play That Changed My Life," because I love to hear these answers. And it could be, to me, Jaja's changed my life, for a day, or I'll probably carry it for a while. But I met Chris doing a play. I connected to a play in school that, found my way into theater. So it can be, from any number of different, periods of your life. But who wants to start?
Oh, you're looking at me again. All right. Now,
You just have such good things to say.
My problem with this is that I would bet that every major change or choice in my life was preceded by a performance. I'm starting at age 5 when somebody made me memorize the text of a narration for the Christmas play.
Yes.
And I did it, and I got a applause. Oh my God. That was the end. It was theater. Or when I was 10 and I went to see the same man I was talking about, Gerald Welsh's production of Auntie Mame with a professional actress, but the rest of it was all local people in the round in an armory. I'm sitting in the front row and Auntie Mame, and if you have to cut this, you will. Auntie Mame says, live, live, live. Life is a banquet and most poor sons of bitches are starving to death. Well, first of all, I heard son of a bitch for the first time in my life, and I thought that was wonderful, but the sentiment just exploded in my brain, and that was the end of that. In 76, I'm going to rehearse the worst of them for you. In 76, I saw Chorus Line about 6 weeks after it opened, standing room, $10 in the back. And it was amazing and wonderful and terrific. And in the second act, Cassie, and I was teaching at Adirondack Community College at the time, and I was teaching theater, and it was all good. And in the second freaking act of a chorus line, Cassie says, I don't want to wait on tables. And what I really don't want to do is teach other people what I ought to be doing myself. 18 months later, I was out of there. Not out of the theater, out of the community college, and wound up doing professional tech for 15 years. Not what I wanted to do. I kind of wanted to be an opera singer, but that's a long story. And I didn't sing well enough. So that was just it. But there was that. I went back to teaching theater, and the last of the huge ones was in 2003, at the Globe Theatre workshop. I'd taken some students to London, and they were doing a scene out of Merchant of Venice. It's Act 3, Scene 3. It's a scene that's a nothing burger. You've seen me do it, Patrick, because I've done it for one of your classes. But it's a scene in which, if you take it as it was rehearsed and written in the 16th century, it's meaningful. But as it's written in a book form, it's junk. It's a wonderful scene, and it's an important part of the plot if you do it the way Shakespeare intended you to do it, and you can cut it completely in a modern version. And for the first time, I saw how that worked. My own students did it for a docent, and they didn't know what they were doing, but when I saw it, everything I thought I knew about theater was wrong. I had to go back to sources. I sound pedantic, but I realized that I knew nothing about Shakespeare, studying it from a proscenium arch notion. Nothing. At 50, nothing. Had to go back. And that obviously, Patrick, changed my life and makes Will Kemp's Players a reality today. So that's how my life, that is my life in the theater.
Thank you, Sandy. And I've now, my dream production of Auntie Mame.
Well, there was the audition right
Yes,
there.
right?
So
I created this podcast to have theater.
I have played Vera. I have.
Oh, awesome.
At the Fort Salem.
Oh, perfect. I'll have to dig through the scrapbooks.
Come on.
We do have them.
All connected.
I think I'm going to get canceled for my answer. And I decided to be honest with you because the thing that really inspired me when I was younger, I was a musical theater kid and a ballet dancer. And when I saw Cats, I know, when I saw Cats, I sat there and I remember at some point in Act 2 being devastated that at some point it was going to end. And it was just the magic of being in the room and identifying that, honestly, I think I could see that there were queer people up there. There was something that was not as masculine as most, male roles that I would have seen, at that time. And I just remember thinking, oh, these people are dancers. I can relate to that. These people are not, they're not macho. There's just something different about this experience. And I remember sitting there and the twinkling lights and all of that and just feeling like I was somewhere else. And I went back the next day, which my parents, I grew up on Cape Cod. We didn't drive over the bridge. So to get to Boston and see that tour was just something that was a whole different world. So while as an adult that may not be the same art I'm as passionate about, it really, checks something off the list for me.
I love that answer.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not canceled. You're not deleting me.
No.
You made me think about all the times, and I'm not going to tell you unless somebody calls me up personally. All the times I've been in a play where I'm sitting there saying, I can feel the thing winding up. Oh, don't, please. Can we just go on for another 3 or 4 hours? I want to stay in this world.
I don't want it to end.
Angels in America. I didn't.
You want to live there?
I wanted. I loved how
Maybe
they were
Antarctica.
thinking. I loved the whole thing.
Oh yes, how they were thinking.
How they were thinking. I loved the same thing with Little Night Music. I didn't want
yes.
that.
I can see that.
And ever, and that was original production too, Patrick. But it was just. Yeah.
Someone asked me, if you could see a production again, or if you only had one production you could see over and over. I was like Nicholas Nickleby, because it went on for like 9 hours. That's almost like, I want to live in it, because it just goes on forever. But it's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
My production is. Well, it wasn't even a production. It was, I didn't really go to theater as a kid. There were school trips, but 10th grade of high school, and it felt very much like Breakfast Club, like the stoners, the dweebs, the jocks, and I felt like I was ping-ponging through all of them. My brother was an athlete, and I was student senate, and I really didn't know where I fit in or, what I was. And I remember we had a creative writing class, and I wrote some things in it, which my parents read and took exception to. And because I was a very honest writer, I was talking about things, and but they got angry. And so I had this falling out with my parents, and kind of like, I'll walk to work and, 6 miles away or something. But I was in English class, and I can still feel the heat, the sun coming in, and we read The Glass Menagerie, and I was a class clown. I always wanted to be heard and funny, and and I read my hand to read, and I read it for 2 days in a row, and I got laughs, and I felt angry, and I was able to tell my mother off, and I felt, Tennessee Williams. I felt, I'm going to go to the movies. And I was like, I want to go, I felt Tom, and I was like, if you had asked me then, I would have said, oh, I'm an actor. I could, because after class, it's like I got, people came up to me and said, what a great job, and we loved hearing you read this, and, and I felt so empowered by it, and I felt I identified with it, and it was like, that's who I am, and pretty much from that point on, I did a gong show or something for school, and then I did my first musical, the only non-singing part. Our school only did musicals. And then, they used to do these playground programs, like 6 o'clock at night. They'd have performances or rehearsals, and we did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for children. I was like a 15-year-old martini, and I was biking to Shaker High School, like 10 miles away. But anyway, from then on. Glass Menagerie is being done this weekend. Bridge Street Theater is doing it through Sunday with an awesome production. So that is my...
Did you ever end up doing the show?
I directed it. Yeah. No, I never played Tom. Although, don't put it out of the way yet. I read of a production in Chicago where Tom is sort of a homeless man, and he lives in this world of, bottles, the glass, and he tells the story from this perspective of, being an, elderly man looking back. So
I could see that. That's interesting.
That's really interesting.
still a chance. No, I directed it, and I loved doing it. I did a couple of Williams. I did Reverend Shannon in Night of the Iguana, and I directed a Suddenly Last Summer, which Sandy costumed fabulously. And Chris and I go out to Provincetown Tennessee Williams Festival for the last 8 years.
Nice.
Yeah. So it lives on, my glass menagerie
That's
fixation.
awesome.
I've seen, Cherry Jones, Jessica Lange, Jessica Tandy.
I worked marketing on the Jessica Lange production. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I saw her in Long Day's Journey into Night. And I was like, wow. She became like this, through work. She wanted to become a stage actor, and, she's a giant now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Brian Dennehy, wanted to work on serious dramatic roles and just, created, that whatever career for himself,
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. So, looking forward to the season ahead, we're here in the first weeks of October. What are you looking forward to?
I mean, we are a calendar year, so I am selfishly looking forward to, we have our first dark period for a few weeks in January. But before we get there, so we're opening Rocky Horror next weekend, which I'm in for the first time. I haven't performed in years. So this will be my first time on our stage, and I'm terrified. But we're also welcoming a traveling storyteller series called Whispering Bones. And this will be the first time we have a cabaret room show going on at the same time as our main stage programming. So kind of a double feature if you can tie the Rocky Horror joke in there. And then we've got a Midsummer Night's Dream. And then our very cheesy title, but our fun holiday series called There's Still No Business Like Snow Business.
Excellent.
So yeah, we're packed through the second week of December and then a little break.
Awesome.
Well, obviously, I'm up to my ears in people and their enemies at Siena, and we open the 9th of November and run for 2 weekends. The information will be accurate on the website and is not accurate in my brain. I just know I have to be there. Until then, every day. But Wilkins Players is in its dark period right now. We're planning for next season. And I wish I had a great season to promote for you right now. It just hasn't happened yet. So stay tuned. It'll be on social media. I'll tell Patrick. It'll be interesting.
Yes.
It'll be interesting.
And last summer you did 2 productions in repertory for most every weekend in July and August.
What we tend to do is to start the first reasonable weekend in July. We try to avoid the 4th of July because it's just not a Shakespeare weekend, you know?
I don't know why.
We tried.
Don't know.
We tried to open on the first weekend in July, and nobody wants to. No, they want fireworks and hot dogs, neither of which we had. And we take 1 weekend off in July, and then through August, almost through Labor Day.
Yep.
And we do 2 shows in rep. They have been Shakespeare's, but they won't always necessarily be Shakespeare's.
Sure.
It's the Shakespeare and the controlling idea was Shakespeare in the Park is such a great idea, but almost any smaller town has a park without Shakespeare all summer. Why? Now, there isn't going to be a need or an audience that'll fill up that park every day, every weekend. So let's move to parks and community theater centers. That was the idea. So we do 2 shows in rep. And repertory theater, if you've never done it, is a real... It's a challenge that pays off for the performer in some very wonderful ways of flexibility and resilience.
Yeah.
It's just part of the process, of the meat and the bones of doing it.
Yeah. And that must be helpful, with all the curveballs that COVID has thrown us, to be able to pick up a show, at a moment's notice and, to fill in or to change hats.
Well, if you think about it, we open every show fresh because
Right.
we've never played it in that space before. In the hour before the couple of hours before we open for any given audience, we've restaged it.
Yeah.
Anything that would need to be restaged has been restaged. It's a brandy new performance for a brandy new audience, and it closes at that performance.
Yeah.
We will never do that ever again. It's terrifying when you first start doing it.
Yeah.
But about a month into it, if you're brandy new, it gets to be a challenge that you know you can do, and it's fun. I mean, what was it, 2 years ago? Somebody got sick, and I had to go on as the abbess in Comedy of Errors because
Nice.
we had a sick actor. In Will Kemp's Players, we always go on. If you're putting on an understudy, we always go on and book. Everything else is right, but there's a script in hand, so the audience understands that this poor person has been snatched from backstage, and it was great fun. And we had the last show of Taming the Shrew and Comedy of Errors. We had understudies on because we had to.
Yeah.
Because we had to.
Great.
In fact, when we cast Comedy of Errors, we cast two dogs. So the dog had, or not Comedy of Errors, I'm sorry, Two Gentlemen of Verona. We had cast two dogs because the dog had to have an understudy.
Yes. Understood. So Rocky Horror, October 20th?
20th through 31st.
Excellent. Enemy of the People at Siena College, November
9 we start,
9.
and for the following those
whenever.
weekends. Yeah.
Harbinger Theatre is presenting Mrs. Packard by Emily Mann, directed by the estimable Chris Foster. And next season, we are doing In the Blood by Suzanne Laurie Parks in March at St. Rose Theatre. And The Squirrels by Robert Askins at Sand Lake Center for the Arts. And our final two, I have an announcement. We are doing the U.S. premiere of Maggie May by Francine Poet at Albany Civic Theater next September. That's very exciting. We just got that last week.
And are we hearing it first?
Yes.
Whoa.
Besides Chris. Yes. Yeah, it's an awesome play. It's about a woman who is suffering with dementia and her husband and how they hold on. And it's told with a bunch of music. The title refers to the Rod Stewart song, which they fell in love to and which comes up as ballast for their relationship and how the family, reacts and responds to this. So we're very, very excited about
Yeah,
it.
congrats.
Thanks.
Good season. Good season.
Yeah, thanks. One more to go. All right. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Kyle and Sandy, for my first podcast of the play that changed my life. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Wonderful fun.
what a great conversation. All right. Thanks very much. And we'll see you again soon. Talk to you soon.